Hey guys, tonight we are going to stop taking our next breath for granted and start looking at the invisible ocean that presses against our skin every single second of every single day. We often look up at the sky and see endless, open freedom, a vast blue void where birds fly and clouds drift. But the reality is far heavier, far more suffocating, and infinitely more complex than just empty space. We are going to dismantle the romance of the atmosphere, peeling back the layers of nitrogen and oxygen to reveal the crushing physics and the chaotic history of the air we breathe. You might feel safe tucked under your covers right now, but you probably won't survive this, because the very thing sustaining you is also slowly oxidizing you, wearing you down and pressing on you with the weight of a small car. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, go ahead and drop a comment with your current location and the local time. I always love seeing where in this heavy, pressurized world you're listening from. Now, let's settle in. I want you to lie very still and focus on the space directly in front of your nose. It looks empty, doesn't it? If you wave your hand through the darkness of your bedroom, it feels like there is nothing there. Perhaps just a slight breeze, a phantom touch of coolness. For most of your life, you have probably equated air with nothingness. When a box is empty, we say it's full of air. When we want space, we go outside to get some air. We treat the atmosphere as a lack of substance, a void that exists solely to be filled by us, by our movements, by our buildings, and by our airplanes. But this is the first lie we tell ourselves to feel comfortable. The reason I stopped loving the air began with the realization that the air is not empty. It is incredibly, oppressively full. You are not lying in a void right now. You are lying at the very bottom of a deep, turbulent, and heavy ocean. It just happens to be an ocean of gas rather than water. But the physics are surprisingly similar. Above you right now, stretching from your duvet up to the edge of space, is a column of air that is roughly 60 miles high. That column isn't weightless. It has mass. It has substance. If you could freeze that column of air into a solid block and set it on a scale, you would be shocked by the number looking back at you. The atmosphere is heavy. It is pressing down on every single inch of your body with a force of 14.7 pounds per square inch. Think about that for a second. Draw a little 1-inch square on the back of your hand with your mind. Imagine placing a roughly 15-pound bowling ball on that square. Now, cover your entire body in bowling balls. That is the reality of your existence. You are currently supporting a weight equivalent to a medium-sized car, crushed from all sides by the atmosphere. The only reason you don't crumple like an empty soda can is that the fluids and gases inside your body are pushing back with equal force. You are in equilibrium, a pressurized vessel evolved to withstand the crushing hug of the sky. But once you realize this, the feeling of lightness disappears. You start to feel the squeeze. You start to realize that walking through a room isn't moving through emptiness. It is wading through a soup of molecules that are battering you constantly. This realization isn't new, but it is one we tend to forget because our survival depends on ignoring it. In the 17th century, the world was still waking up to the idea that air was actually stuff. Before that, people talked about the horror of vacuum, nature's abhorrence of a vacuum, but they didn't fully grasp that we were bottom dwellers in a fluid sea. It took a student of Galileo, a man named Evangelista Torricelli, to really ruin the magic for everyone. He conducted an experiment with a tube of mercury that proved the air had weight, that it could push down on a liquid and force it up a tube. He famously wrote, "We live submerged at the bottom of an ocean of the element air, which by unquestioned experiments is known to have weight." Submerged. That is the word that sticks with me. That is the word that changed how I look at the sky. We aren't on top of the world. We are underneath it. We are the benthic creatures crawling across the floor of the atmospheric sea, subject to its currents, its pressure, and its changing composition. When you look up at the stars, you aren't looking through a clear window. You are looking through a hazy, distorting lens of gas that thins out the higher you go. The air is thickest here, right where you are sleeping. It is clotted with nitrogen, oxygen, argon, and carbon dioxide, all swarming around you, bouncing off your skin, filling your lungs, and rushing out again. The heaviness isn't just physical, it's conceptual. When you understand the weight of the air, you realize you are trapped. You cannot leave this narrow band of pressure without a pressurized suit or a sturdy metal hull, or your blood would literally boil in your veins. We are prisoners of this pressure. We love it because it keeps us alive, but it is a cage nonetheless. The atmosphere holds us down against the surface of the planet just as much as gravity does. It is a blanket that has been pulled up over our heads, tight and heavy, tucked in at the corners of the horizon. And consider the violence of it. Air seems peaceful when you're just lying there, but at the molecular level, it is a riot. The molecules of nitrogen and oxygen in your room are zipping around at roughly 1,000 miles per hour, colliding with each other and with you billions of times a second. That is what air pressure is. It is the collective force of countless microscopic bombardments. You are being pummeled. Your skin is the shield that takes the beating. If you could hear the atomic reality of the air, it wouldn't be a gentle silence. It would be a deafening roar of impact. We have just evolved ears that filter out the static, leaving us with the illusion of quiet. I used to think of the wind as a gentle caress, a spirit moving through the trees. Now I see it for what it is, a fluid trying to equalize pressure, a massive displacement of heavy matter. When a storm hits, it is not an angry spirit. It is tons of air crashing into other tons of air. The sheer mass of the atmosphere is staggering 5 quadrillion tons. That is the blanket you are sleeping under. 5 quadrillion tons of gas, wrapping the Earth in a fragile, heavy shell. It feels protective, yes, but it also feels confining. It is a closed system. Every breath you take has been breathed by someone else, passed through the lungs of dinosaurs, cycled through the leaves of ancient ferns, and dissolved into the oceans before rising again. This weight, this invisible oppression, is the first reason the romance faded for me. I realized that I am not separate from the environment. I am under it. I am carrying it. And it is heavy. It presses on my chest when I try to sleep. It pushes on my eardrums when I drive up a mountain. It is a constant physical reminder that I am a biological machine operating within very specific tolerance levels. If the air gets too light, I die. If it gets too heavy, I die. I am walking a tightrope of pressure every day, blissfully unaware until I stop and think about the ocean above my head. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine that weight settling over you. Not in a scary way, but in a grounding way. You are pinned to the bed by the sky. You are held in place by the column of air that reaches up to the blackness of space. You are safe in the crush, but safety is not the same as love. I respect the air. I fear the air. But I stopped loving it when I realized it wasn't a free, open emptiness, but a dense, heavy barrier. And the worst part? This heavy, crushing ocean we live in hasn't always been this way. It has changed before, and it is changing now. The air you are breathing tonight is not the same air that first wrapped our planet. In fact, the air we consider fresh and vital today was once the greatest poison the Earth had ever known. We think of oxygen as life, but there was a time when it was the ultimate bringer of death. You assume that the air you are breathing right now is the standard, the default setting for a living planet. But that is perhaps the biggest misconception of all. If we could transport your bed back in time, deep back, past the dinosaurs, past the first trees, past the very first fish to wiggle onto a muddy bank, you would suffocate in minutes. But before you died, you would witness a world that was functioning perfectly well without the very thing you crave. This is where my trust in the air began to fracture even further. When I learned that oxygen was not a gift given to the Earth at its birth. Oxygen was a waste product. Oxygen was the exhaust fume of a biological machine that nearly sterilized the planet. Let's drift back about 2.5 billion years. The Earth is unrecognizable. The sky above you is not the familiar azure blue. It is a hazy, sickly pinkish orange, thick with methane and haze. The sun is fainter, a younger, cooler star struggling to warm the rock. There is no green on the continents, just bare, scoured stone, gray and brown, eroded by rain that is more acid than water. But the oceans are teeming. They are full of life. Not fish or whales, but vast, slimy mats of single-celled organisms. These were the original masters of the Earth, the anaerobes. They lived in a dark, chemically rich paradise where oxygen was nowhere to be found. To them, oxygen was what cyanide is to you. It was reactive, corrosive, and deadly. They thrived on methane, sulfur, and iron, building a quiet, slime-coated empire that lasted for hundreds of millions of years. Then, something changed. A random mutation, a twist of genetic code in a tiny organism called cyanobacteria. You might know them as blue-green algae, the stuff that makes pond scum look gross in the summer. But back then, they were the ultimate innovators. They figured out a new trick: photosynthesis. They learned to drink the sunlight, split water molecules apart, and harvest the energy. It was an incredible breakthrough, a limitless power source. But every engine produces exhaust, and the exhaust of this new solar engine was a toxic, highly reactive gas, oxygen. At first, the Earth has defenses against this poison. For millions of years, the cyanobacteria pumped out their oxygen, but the planet absorbed it. The oceans were rich in dissolved iron. As soon as the oxygen hit the water, it reacted with the iron. It rusted the oceans. Imagine that. The entire global sea turning red, heavy particles of rust raining down to the seafloor to form the banded iron formations we mine today. The Earth was literally bleeding rust to neutralize the poison. But eventually, the iron ran out. The sponge was full. The oceans couldn't soak up any more of this toxic waste. That is when the horror began. The oxygen started bubbling out of the water and into the atmosphere. This was the Great Oxidation Event, though a better name is the oxygen catastrophe. As the gas accumulated in the sky, it started to massacre the life that was already there. The anaerobes had nowhere to hide. The air they touched burned them. It tore their cell walls apart. It disrupted their chemistry. It was a global chemical warfare attack launched by the cyanobacteria against everything else. The dominant life forms of Earth, the ones that had ruled for eons, were wiped out in a microscopic genocide of unimaginable scale. They died in the trillions. The only survivors were the ones who managed to bury themselves deep in the mud, hidden away in oxygen-free pockets where their descendants still live today, in the black sludge of swamps, or deep in your own gut, hiding from the air you breathe. But the devastation didn't stop with the killing of the microbes. The atmosphere itself broke. Remember that methane sky I mentioned? Methane is a potent greenhouse gas, trapping heat and keeping the young Earth warm despite the faint sun. Oxygen reacts violently with methane. As the oxygen levels rose, it scrubbed the methane out of the atmosphere, breaking it down into carbon dioxide and water. The planetary blanket was ripped away. The temperature crashed. The Earth plunged into the Huronian glaciation, one of the longest and most severe ice ages in history. Some scientists believe the entire planet froze over, becoming a snowball Earth, a white, dead ball of ice floating in space for millions of years. All because some green slime learned how to eat sunlight and didn't know where to put its trash. The air wasn't life-giving. It was a climate-destroying, mass-extinguishing pollutant. It sterilized the surface and locked the world in ice. When I look at a tree now, or a patch of algae in a lake, I don't just see nature. I see the descendants of the greatest villains in geological history. I see the terraformers who didn't care what they destroyed. And when I take a deep breath, I am reminded that I am an organism built to run on poison. We, the animals, the humans, are the scavengers who evolved to utilize the toxic waste of the plants. We learned to harness the fire of oxygen, to burn our food, to move faster, to think harder. But we are living in the aftermath of a chemical spill. We are the mutants who adapted to the polluted sky. It changes how you feel about fresh air, doesn't it? You are told to go outside and get some fresh air because it's good for you. But historically speaking, fresh air is the scar tissue of a planetary trauma. The atmosphere you are sleeping under is not a nurturing mother. It is a graveyard. Every molecule of oxygen entering your lungs right now is a reminder of the billions of anaerobic lives that were extinguished to make room for us. We are the beneficiaries of a catastrophe. This betrayal of the air is deep. It suggests that the atmosphere is not a stable, benevolent force, but a chaotic battleground where gases war for dominance. The nitrogen, the bulk of our air, is the neutral bystander, the inert filler that stops us from burning up. But the oxygen is the aggressor. It is the gas that makes fires burn. It is the gas that makes iron crumble into dust. It is the gas that slowly ages your cells, oxidizing you from the inside out, just like it rusted the ancient oceans. You are slowly burning, a controlled combustion kept in check by antioxidants and repair mechanisms, but burning nonetheless. So as you lie there, imagining the ancient, orange skies fading into the dangerous clear blue we have today, remember that the air has never been safe. It has always been a weapon. The balance we enjoy now is a fragile truce between the rock, the water, and the life that breathes. And just as the air changed back then, shifting from a methane blanket to an oxygen poison, it set the stage for humanity to misunderstand the very nature of disease. We spent thousands of years fearing the air, but for all the wrong reasons. We didn't know about the oxygen catastrophe, so we invented ghosts. We looked at the fog and the mist and saw monsters, blaming the wind itself for the sicknesses that ravaged our cities. We moved from a chemical fear we couldn't understand to a superstitious fear that would haunt us for centuries. The air was about to become the villain in a whole new way, not because of what it was, but because of what we imagined it carried. The air had already committed its first great crime by poisoning the ancient world with oxygen, but humanity didn't know about that. We were too young, too small, and too terrified of the immediate darkness to worry about geological time. Instead, we developed a new, more intimate paranoia. We began to believe that the air itself was malice in vapor form. This is the next chapter in why I drifted away from loving the atmosphere, the era of miasma. For centuries, we looked at the invisible ocean around us and decided that it wasn't just heavy, and it wasn't just cold, it was infected. We convinced ourselves that the wind was a carrier of death, and that a single deep breath in the wrong place at the wrong time could rot us from the inside out. You have probably heard the word malaria before. You know it as a disease carried by mosquitoes, a biological exchange of parasites. But break the word down. Mal meaning bad, aria meaning air, bad air. The very name of the disease is a fossil of our fear. For thousands of years, we didn't blame bugs or bacteria because we couldn't see them. We blamed the fog. We blamed the damp, heavy stillness that hung over swamps and marshes. We looked at the mist creeping through the trees at twilight and saw a ghost that wanted to kill us. And so, we learned to hold our breath. We learned to fear the night breeze. We learned to seal our windows tight, suffocating in our own stale exhalations, because we believed the fresh air outside was a silent assassin. Imagine you are walking through a European city in the 14th century. The streets are narrow, twisting canyons of wood and stone. There is no sewage system. The gutters are running with filth animal waste, and the refuse of butcher shops. The smell is overpowering, a physical wall of stench that hits you the moment you step out your door. In this world, the smell wasn't just a nuisance. It was a warning signal. The medical experts of the time, the smartest people in the room, believed that this smell was the disease. They believed that rotting matter released invisible particles, a miasma, that corrupted the air. If you smelled the rot, you were already inhaling the infection. This belief turned the air into a terrifying enemy. It wasn't a neutral gas anymore. It was a medium for moral and physical corruption. Panic would set in when the wind shifted. If the breeze blew from the direction of a graveyard or a stagnant pond, people would cover their faces, terrified that the corrupted air was washing over them. During the Black Death, this fear reached a fever pitch. The air felt heavy with the weight of millions dying. People believed the atmosphere itself had thickened, becoming sticky and venomous. They lit massive bonfires at street corners, burning aromatic woods, tar, and herbs, trying to purify the sky. They were trying to scrub the atmosphere with smoke, fighting the invisible poison with visible fire. And think of the plague doctor. You know the image, the long black leather coat, the wide-brimmed hat, and that nightmare-inducing mask with the long, curved bird beak. It is a staple of Halloween costumes now, a symbol of Gothic horror. But look at it from the perspective of someone who fears the air. That beak wasn't a fashion statement. It was a gas mask. The beak was hollow, packed tight with theriac, a compound of dried flowers, herbs, spices, and camphor. The doctor was literally trying to filter the world before it reached his lungs. He was hiding behind a wall of perfume, believing that if he could smell roses instead of rotting flesh, the air couldn't hurt him. It was a tragic, desperate attempt to curate the atmosphere, to build a personal bubble of good air in a world of bad air. The tragedy, of course, is that they were wrong. They were tragically, fatally wrong. While they were obsessing over the smell of the air, the real killers, the fleas on the rats, the bacteria in the water, the viruses on dirty hands, were slipping past their defenses unnoticed. They shut their windows to keep out the night air, unknowingly locking themselves in with the very rats that carried the plague. They avoided fresh breezes that might have blown away the pathogens, opting instead for stagnant, stuffy rooms where sickness could fester. The air wasn't the enemy they thought it was, but their fear of it made them vulnerable to the true threats. This era cemented a deep, instinctual distrust of the atmosphere in our collective psyche. Even today, you hear echoes of it. Don't go out without a coat. You'll catch a cold. The damp air will get into your bones. We still carry the ghost of miasma in our grandmother's warnings. We still instinctively cover our mouths when we pass a bad smell, not just because it's gross, but because deep down, a part of our lizard brain still thinks the smell can kill us. We treat the air as guilty until proven innocent. I stopped loving the air when I realized how much terror it has caused us, even when it was innocent. It was the scapegoat for our ignorance. We projected our own filth, our own lack of hygiene, onto the sky. We made the air a monster because we couldn't face the squalor we lived in. We looked up at the gray, low-hanging clouds and saw doom, when we should have been looking down at the rats scurrying over our boots. But there is a darker turn here. Miasma was a fantasy, a superstition born of fear. The air wasn't actually poisonous then. We just thought it was. But humanity has a strange way of making its nightmares come true. We spent centuries fearing that the air was full of smoke and poison. And then, as if to prove ourselves right, we decided to fill it with smoke and poison for real. We stopped fearing the ghosts in the mist and started building machines that would turn the sky black. We traded the imaginary bad air of the medieval swamp for the very real, very choking bad air of the industrial furnace. As the scientific revolution took hold, we dispelled the myth of miasma. We learned about germs. We learned about bacteria. We cleared the name of the air, declaring it innocent of the plague. But just as we exonerated the atmosphere, we began to assault it. We discovered coal. We discovered steam. We discovered that we could burn the buried forests of the Carboniferous era to power our ambitions. And the sky, which had been innocent of our accusations during the plague, was about to become guilty of a whole new crime. Lying there now, take a slow breath. It feels clean, hopefully. But imagine if that breath tasted of sulfur. Imagine if the air in your bedroom wasn't clear, but thick with a greasy, black soot that clung to your curtains and stained your sheets. The era of miasma was about fear of the unknown. The era that followed was about the arrogance of the known. We stopped fearing the air and started treating it as a sewer for our smoke. The romance of the blue sky was about to be buried under a layer of grit that would darken the sun at noon and turn the simple act of breathing into a struggle for survival. The ghosts were gone, but the chimneys were rising. The transition wasn't subtle. It was a violent, roaring eruption of industry that grabbed the atmosphere by the throat and didn't let go. We stepped out of the age of superstition and into the age of steam, and in doing so, we decided that the sky was no longer a sacred canopy, but a chimney. This is where the air truly began to lose its innocence for me. It wasn't just a passive weight anymore, or a misunderstood ghost. It was becoming a victim. And as we victimized the air, it turned on us with a vengeance we hadn't anticipated. Imagine standing in Manchester or Birmingham in the early 1800s. The pastoral green of the posh English countryside is being devoured by a sprawling beast of brick and iron. The horizon is no longer defined by trees or church steeples, but by smokestacks, hundreds of them, rising like the charred fingers of a giant, poking holes in the clouds. These weren't the small, cozy hearth fires of the past. These were blast furnaces, cotton mills, steam engines hungrier than any living thing. They demanded coal, millions of tons of it, and in return, they vomited thick, black smoke into the air 24 hours a day. The change in the texture of reality was visceral. People writing at the time described the sun not as a yellow ball of fire, but as a copper penny struggling to shine through a heavy, gray wool blanket. The sky lost its depth. It became a low ceiling of soot. If you wore a white shirt in the morning, the collar would be gray by noon and black by supper. The air wasn't just gas. It was grit. It had texture. You could chew it. You could feel it grinding between your teeth. The romance of a breath of fresh air became a cruel joke because there was no fresh air to be found. Every inhalation was a microdose of carbon and sulfur. This was the birth of the industrial sky. We romanticize the Victorian era sometimes, the top hats, the cobblestones, the gas lamps. But we forget that the gas lamps were necessary because it was dark at midday. The smoke was so thick in industrial centers that it created an artificial twilight. And this wasn't just ugly. It was changing the biology of everything it touched. The trees in the cities died, choked by the soot coating their leaves, blocking their ability to photosynthesize. The buildings, once proud limestone and marble, turned black, covered in a crust of grime that we are still power washing off today. But the most disturbing change was in the moths. You might have heard of the peppered moth. Before the factories, these moths were mostly white with black speckles, perfect camouflage against the pale lichens on the tree bark. But as the factories pumped out their smoke, the lichens died and the tree bark turned black with soot. The white moths were suddenly visible to birds, glowing like beacons against the dark trees. They were eaten in droves. But the rare, dark-colored mutant moths? They were suddenly invisible. They survived. Within a few decades, the entire population of moths shifted from white to black. We had polluted the air so thoroughly that we forced evolution to change the color of the species, just so it could hide in our filth. That is the power of the industrial sky. It rewrote the genetic code of nature to match its own darkness. And what about the humans living under this lid? They were changing too. A new kind of cough echoed through the tenements, a deep, rattling hack that signaled lungs coated in dust. Rickets became an epidemic among children, not just because of poor diet, but because the smoke was so thick it blocked the ultraviolet rays of the sun. Their bodies couldn't make vitamin D because we had built a wall of smog between them and the star that gives us life. We had severed our connection to the cosmos with a layer of burning coal. The air had become a barrier, a prison ceiling that kept the light out and the sickness in. I stopped loving the air when I looked at paintings from this era. Look at the art of J.M.W. Turner or the Impressionists who visited London. Those hazy, blurry, atmospheric swirls of purple and orange and gray, that wasn't just artistic style. That was realism. They were painting the pollution. They were capturing the way the light scattered through the coal smoke. We look at it now and think it's beautiful, moody, atmospheric, but it's a portrait of a suffocating world. It's beauty born of toxicity. We were aestheticizing our own slow poisoning. The psychological weight of this gray sky must have been crushing. Imagine never seeing a clear blue dome above you. Imagine the psychological dampener of living in perpetual shadow. It changes a person. It makes the world feel smaller, dirtier, more hopeless. The air became something you had to fight against, something you had to wash off your skin every night. It wasn't a life giver. It was a stain. And the arrogance of it all? We looked at the infinite sky and thought, it's big enough. It can take it. We treated the atmosphere as an infinite sink, a garbage chute that went nowhere. We didn't understand that the air circulates, that the smoke rising from a factory in London would drift, settle, and accumulate. We were like children peeing in a swimming pool, convinced that the water volume was large enough to hide our mess, forgetting that we were the ones who had to swim in it. This was the era where the smog was born a portmanteau of smoke and fog, a new word for a new torture. It wasn't the natural mist of the moors. It was a chemical brew. The sulfur dioxide from the coal mixed with the water vapor in the air to create weak sulfuric acid. It was literally raining acid on the people. Their eyes stung, their throats burned, the statues on their cathedrals dissolved, the stone faces melting away under the tears of the industrial sky. If the air could melt stone, imagine what it was doing to the delicate pink tissues of the human lung. So, as you lie there, grateful for the Avake system or the filter that is hopefully humming nearby, remember the industrial sky. Remember that for 100 years, humanity forgot the color blue. We accepted a gray existence as the price of progress. We traded the breath in our lungs for the coins in our pockets. And the air, battered and bruised, thickened with our exhaust, waiting for the moment when it couldn't take anymore. Because the thing about pollution is that it doesn't just float away. It gathers, it waits. And sometimes, when the weather conditions are just right or just wrong, it strikes back. The industrial sky was bad, but it was a dispersed misery. It was a daily grind. But the air was about to show us that it could concentrate that misery into something far more potent. It was about to remind us that we cannot simply flush our waste into the sky and expect it to disappear. Sometimes the sky fills up, and sometimes the smell becomes so powerful that it can bring the most powerful empire on earth to its knees. The soot was in the air, but the filth was also in the river, and in the summer of 1858, the two would combine in a way that would make history not for a storm or a fire, but for a stench so profound it has its own capitalized name. We were about to face the great stink, where the air became so solid with rot that it felt like a physical assault. We often think of air pollution as something modern, something made of chemicals and car exhaust. But there was a moment in history when the air was polluted by something far more primal and far more humiliating. We are moving from the soot-choked skies of the Industrial Revolution to the riverbanks of London in the summer of 1858. The air here didn't just taste like coal. It tasted like death. This was the year the atmosphere itself seemed to rot. This was the year of the Great Stink. To understand why the air turned on London, you have to understand the River Thames. For centuries, it was the lifeblood of the city, the main highway, the source of drinking water. But by the mid-19th century, it had become something else entirely. An open sewer. Every toilet, every slaughterhouse, every factory in a city of millions flushed its waste directly into the river. For years, the tides washed it back and forth, a sloshing soup of filth that never really left. The Londoners ignored it, holding their noses and looking away, trusting the air to dilute the horror. But in the summer of 1858, the weather conspired against them. A blistering heat wave struck the city. Temperatures soared into the 90s and stayed there. The sun beat down on the sluggish, choked river. The water level dropped, exposing wide banks of foul, fermenting sludge that had been accumulating for decades. And then the biology took over. The bacteria in the muck went into overdrive in the heat, breaking down the waste and releasing vast, billowing clouds of methane, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia. The result was not just a smell, it was a physical force. The air over London became a toxic fog of fecal matter. It was said that you could smell the city miles before you could see it. It wasn't a smell that you could get used to. It was a smell that induced vomiting, fainting, and sheer panic. It permeated everything. It seeped into the curtains, the upholstery, the very clothes on people's backs. The air, which should have been the relief from the heat, became the torture device. Parliament meets right on the banks of the Thames, in the Palace of Westminster. The most powerful men in the British Empire, men who ruled over India and parts of Africa, men who commanded navies and armies, found themselves defeated by the air. They tried to ignore it. They soaked heavy drapes in chloride of lime, a strong bleach, and hung them over the windows to filter the stench. It didn't work. The smell laughed at their drapes. It slithered through the cracks, filling the debating chambers with the scent of human waste. It got so bad that they seriously discussed abandoning London. Think about that. The capital of the greatest empire on earth, brought to the brink of evacuation, not by an invading army, not by a plague, but by the smell of its own air. The Chancellor of the Exchequer fled a room with a handkerchief pressed to his face, gagging. Committees were disbanded because the members couldn't concentrate without retching. The library of the House of Commons became a no-go zone. The air there was simply unbreathable. The press went wild. Punch magazine published cartoons of Father Thames as a skeletal, filthy ghoul rising from the water to suffocate the city. The air was no longer seen as a passive element. It was an active assailant. It was a reminder that no matter how rich or powerful you were, you still had to breathe. And if the air was corrupted, your power meant nothing. The stench was the great equalizer. The Queen breathed it. The pauper breathed it. The air connected the palace to the gutter in the most visceral way possible. I stopped loving the air when I realized how easily it carries our shame. We like to think our waste disappears when we flush it, but the air remembers. The Great Stink was the atmosphere, holding up a mirror to humanity and saying, "This is what you are." It was the air refusing to be a silent accomplice any longer. It took the invisible filth and made it undeniable. It forced a reckoning. Because of this suffocating summer, London finally built its massive sewer system, a marvel of engineering that is still used today. They didn't build it because they cared about hygiene or public health primarily. They built it because they couldn't stand the smell. The air bullied them into progress. The atmosphere became so hostile that it forced civilization to evolve. It proved that the air has a breaking point. You can only dump so much into it before it dumps it back onto you. But there is a lingering horror in this story. During the height of the stink, people were terrified of the smell, not just because it was gross, but because the ghost of miasma was still whispering in their ears. They thought the smell was the disease. They thought the stink would give them cholera. Ironically, the smell was harmless. It was the water they were drinking that was killing them. But the air took the blame. The air became the villain again, the carrier of terror. Imagine lying in your bed in London that summer. The heat is sweltering, but you can't open the window. If you do, the smell of a million rotting mistakes floods your room. You are trapped in a hot box, sweating, suffocating, praying for a breeze that never comes. The air, your constant companion, has become your jailer. It presses against the glass, heavy, green, and foul. You realize that you are at the mercy of the wind, and the wind has forsaken you. This was a local catastrophe, a city-sized chokehold. But it was a warning that we ignored. We solved the smell of the river, but we didn't solve the mindset that created it. We continued to treat the environment as a dumping ground. And while the great stink was a natural byproduct of biological waste, humanity was about to take the concept of bad air and weaponize it. We were about to take the lessons of chemistry and use them not to clean the air, but to poison it intentionally. The great stink was an accident. It was the result of negligence. But what came next was deliberate. It was the calculated transformation of the atmosphere into an instrument of war. We leave the rotting banks of the Thames and fast forward to the fields of Flanders. The air is about to turn green again, but this time it's not the smell of sewage. It's the smell of pineapple and pepper. It's the smell of chlorine. And this time, the air won't just make you vomit. It will drown you on dry land. The romance of the wind was about to die in the trenches of World War I. The shift from the accidental rot of London to the calculated malice of the Western Front is the moment the air lost its neutrality forever. In London, the air was a victim of our filth. In Ypres, the air was recruited as an assassin. It is one thing to choke on the byproducts of industry or the stench of neglect. It is another thing entirely to look out across a spring meadow, see a gentle breeze stirring the grass, and realize that the wind has been engineered to kill you. This is where the romance of the breeze died for me, on April 22, 1915, in a trench in Belgium. Place yourself there. It is late afternoon. The sun is beginning to dim, casting those long golden shadows that usually signal the end of the workday. You are a soldier, caked in mud, tired, huddled in a hole in the ground. You are terrified of bullets. You are terrified of artillery shells that scream out of the sky. You are terrified of the sniper who waits for you to pop your head up. But you are not terrified of the air. The air is your only luxury. You lean back against the dirt wall and take a deep breath, smelling the damp earth, the faint scent of heating oil, perhaps the distant aroma of spring flowers blooming in the ravaged fields of no man's land. The air is the one thing that feels free in a world of barbed wire. Then the shelling stops. A strange silence falls over the German lines opposite you. You peer over the parapet, expecting a charge, a wave of gray uniforms. But there are no men. Instead, you see hissing valves opening. You see puffs of white smoke that merge and darken. A cloud begins to form. But it's not a rain cloud, and it's not the gray smoke of gunpowder. It is a sickly, vibrant green-yellow. It looks heavy, unnatural. It doesn't drift up into the sky like honest smoke. It sinks. It pours out of the enemy trenches like a liquid, hugging the ground, rolling over the craters, filling the shell holes, and moving inexorably toward you. The wind is blowing from the east. For thousands of years, sailors prayed for a favorable wind. Farmers prayed for a breeze to cool their brows. But now, the wind is a traitor. It is the delivery system for a weapon that defies all the rules of warfare. As the green wall approaches, roughly 4 miles wide and moving at the speed of a brisk walk, you see the rats running first. They scurry out of the low points, desperate to get higher. Then the insects, buzzing frantically. Then the birds fall out of the sky, dropping like stones into the mud. When the edge of the cloud hits your trench, the first thing you notice is the smell. It isn't the rot of the Thames. It smells sharp, metallic, strangely sweet, like a mix of pineapple and pepper, or the overwhelming scent of bleach. You cough. You try to wave it away, but this isn't dust. It is chlorine gas. And the moment you inhale it, the air betrays you in the most violent way possible. The chemistry of this moment is simple and horrifying. Chlorine gas reacts with water. Your body is mostly water. The mucous membranes in your throat, the delicate lining of your lungs, the moisture in your eyes, it all reacts instantly with the gas. When chlorine meets water, it forms hydrochloric acid. You are not just breathing in smoke. You are breathing in acid. You are literally burning your lungs from the inside out. The panic that ensues is primal. Your body's instinct when it can't breathe is to gasp, to take deeper, harder breaths. But here, that instinct is a death sentence. The deeper you breathe, the more acid you create. The soldiers around you are clawing at their throats, their faces turning blue, then violet, then black as they suffocate. They are drowning on dry land. Their lungs are filling with the fluid their bodies are producing to try to wash away the acid, a foam of blood and water bubbling up from their lips. It is a slow, agonizing drowning, happening right there in the dirt, caused by the very act of respiration. This was the psychological terror of the green cloud. You couldn't shoot it. You couldn't bayonet it. You couldn't hide from it in a bunker, because the gas was heavier than air. It sank into the deepest, safest bunkers and pooled there, waiting for victims. The only safety was high ground, standing up on the trench parapet, where the machine gunners could cut you down. It forced you to choose, death by bullet or death by breath. And the defense? That is the most humiliating part of the story. There were no gas masks yet. The scientists had unleashed the weapon before the soldiers had the shield. As the green fog rolled over them, orders were shouted down the line. A desperate, improvised solution passed from command. Pee on a cloth. It sounds like a joke, but it was the only hope. The ammonia in urine could neutralize the chlorine. So thousands of grown men, terrified and choking, had to urinate on their socks, their handkerchiefs, or strips of their uniforms, and tie these sodden, warm, foul-smelling rags over their faces. Think about that image. To survive the air, you had to breathe through your own waste. The atmosphere had become so hostile, so toxic, that the smell of urine was the sweet scent of life. The fresh air was death. The foul rag was survival. It completely inverted the natural order of the world. I stopped loving the air because of Ypres. It proved that the atmosphere is permeable to our worst intentions. We took the sky, the thing that connects every living being, and we poisoned it. We turned the shared breath of the world into a weapon of mass destruction. After Ypres, the air was never trusted again. Soldiers carried masks and satchels for the rest of the century. The sight of a gas mask became the symbol of the modern age, a faceless, bug-eyed acknowledgement that the environment itself is an enemy combatant. And the gas didn't just disappear. It lingered. It settled in the soil. It drifted into the nearby towns. It killed the leaves on the trees and the cows in the pastures. It showed us that air has no borders. You can release a cloud to kill your enemy, but if the wind shifts, it kills you. The British learned this the hard way at the Battle of Loos, where they released their own gas, only for the wind to change and blow it back into their own trenches. The air does not take sides. It is a fluid, chaotic medium that carries whatever we give it, indifferent to the uniform you wear. That green cloud was the beginning of a new kind of anxiety. Before 1915, you feared the storm, the cold, the miasma. But after 1915, you had to fear the chemistry of the air. You had to wonder what invisible molecules were drifting on the breeze. Was it pollen? Was it dust? Or was it something synthesized in a lab designed to melt your alveoli. The innocence of a deep breath was gone. Every inhalation became a gamble, a trust exercise with the wind that we had no reason to trust anymore. We had poisoned the air with smoke in the Industrial Revolution and with gas in the Great War. But humanity wasn't done. We were just getting started with invisible threats. Smoke you can see, chlorine you can smell. But what if we filled the air with something you couldn't see, couldn't smell, and couldn't taste? What if we filled the air with energy itself? We were about to enter an era where the air would sparkle with a new kind of danger. A danger we would foolishly embrace as a miracle cure. Before we understood, it was a slow-motion sentence. We are moving from the green fog of war to the glowing dust of peace. The green fog of Ypres eventually dissipated, settling into the mud and washing away with the rains. But the fear it left behind carved a deep scar in the human consciousness. We had learned that the air could be weaponized chemically. But humans are strange creatures. We have short memories, especially when a new shiny miracle comes along. In the decades following the Great War, we didn't just stop fearing the invisible properties of the air. We began to worship them. We entered a brief, delirious period where we believed that if the air glowed, if it hummed with invisible energy, it would make us immortal. We traded the sour smell of chlorine for the shimmering promise of the era of glowing dust. This is the chapter of history where I stopped loving the air because I realized how easily we can be seduced by our own destruction. In the 1920s and 30s, radioactivity wasn't seen as a horror. It was the new magic. It was liquid sunshine. We didn't understand alpha and beta decay yet. We just knew that radium gave off heat and light, and we assumed that this energy was the spark of life itself. We began to look for ways to get this energy into our bodies, and the easiest way was through the lungs. Imagine walking into a high-end spa in the 1930s. You are handed a plush white robe. You are led into a dim, comfortable room called an inhalatorium. It sounds medical, sophisticated. You sit in a comfortable chair, and the air around you is pumped full of radon gas. This was a premium service. People paid good money to sit in these rooms and breathe deeply, filling their chests with radioactive isotopes. They believed the ionized air would stimulate their cells, cure their arthritis, and invigorate their blood. They walked out feeling tingly, lightheaded, convinced they had just inhaled the essence of vitality. They had no idea they were bathing their delicate lung tissue in ionizing radiation. They were inhaling microscopic particles that would lodge in the branching bronchioles of their lungs and fire subatomic bullets into their DNA for the rest of their lives. The air in those rooms was alive. Yes, but it was alive with a force that shredded the very blueprints of human biology. It was a slow-motion suicide, marketed as a health tonic. The air had been turned into a deceptive lover, whispering promises of eternal youth while quietly planting the seeds of necrosis. But the obsession with radioactive air didn't stay in the spas. It went global. And it went from a health fad to a planetary experiment on July 16, 1945. When the first atomic bomb, Trinity, was detonated in the New Mexico desert, we did something to the atmosphere that had never happened in 4.5 billion years. We punched it. We injected it with man-made stars. We tend to focus on the explosion, the fireball, the shockwave, the heat that turned sand into glass. But for me, the terror is in the cloud. That iconic mushroom cloud is not just a shape. It is a vacuum cleaner. It sucks up thousands of tons of dirt, rock, and debris, pulverizes it into dust, superheats it until it vaporizes, and then mixes it with the radioactive byproducts of the fission reaction. And then, and this is the part we forget, lets it go. The cloud rises into the stratosphere, piercing the layers of the sky we discussed earlier. And there, the high-altitude winds catch it. The fallout. It sounds so passive, like leaves falling in autumn. But fallout is the glowing dust of the bomb returning to Earth. After the Trinity test, that radioactive dust didn't just stay in the desert. It drifted. It rode the jet stream. It moved across the Midwest, dusting the cornfields of Indiana, settling on the wheat in Kansas, falling with the rain in New York. There is a famous story that perfectly illustrates this betrayal of the air. In the 1940s, the Kodak Photography Company started noticing that their X-ray film was ruined. It was foggy, spotted with unexplainable exposure marks. They traced the problem to the cardboard packaging. The cardboard was made from corn husks grown in the Midwest. Those husks had absorbed radioactive isotopes from the rain that had fallen through the clouds of the Trinity test thousands of miles away. The air had carried the bomb, particle by particle, across a continent, and it was hot enough to ruin film inside a box. If it could ruin film, imagine what it was doing to the soft, wet interior of a human lung. This was the moment the atmosphere became a global delivery system for poison. We realized that there is no such thing as over there. When a bomb goes off in Nevada, or Siberia, or the Pacific, the air carries the ghost of that explosion to your doorstep. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the superpowers detonated hundreds of nuclear weapons in the atmosphere. They treated the sky as a laboratory. They turned the blue vault of heaven into a testing ground. The air became saturated with strontium-90, cesium-137, and carbon-14. These aren't natural components of our breath. They are the fingerprints of our hubris. The winds carried them everywhere. People in London, in Tokyo, in Buenos Aires, everyone was breathing the debris of American and Soviet bombs. We created a global background of radiation. If you were born after 1945, your teeth contain isotopes that wouldn't have been there if you were born a century earlier. The air literally changed the composition of your bones. I stopped loving the air when I looked at the sunsets of that era. They say the sunsets in the 1950s were spectacular vibrant purples, deep reds, glowing neon oranges. It wasn't natural beauty. It was the light refracting off millions of tons of radioactive dust suspended in the stratosphere. We were admiring the debris of our own weapons. We were romanticizing the fallout. It's a chilling thought, standing on a porch, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air, watching a sunset created by a megaton blast, and not realizing that the shimmering beauty is actually a curtain of slow death falling over the world. This era taught us that the air is sticky. It holds on to things. It doesn't just transport birds and clouds. It transports the heavy metals of our mistakes. We broke the seal on the atom, and the air was the first victim. It absorbed the shock, and then it distributed the consequences. We made the atmosphere radioactive. We took the one thing that every living creature needs to survive, a clean breath, and we spiked it with the most dangerous materials in the universe. And we did it with a shrug. We did it for national security. We did it for science. We watched the mushroom clouds rise and sheared, wearing our sunglasses, ignoring the fact that the wind was blowing toward the towns where our children were sleeping. The downwinders, the people who lived in the path of this radioactive air, began to sicken years later. Leukemia, thyroid cancers, mysterious ailments. The air had betrayed them. It had come into their homes invisible and silent, carrying the dust of the test site. So now, when you see dust motes dancing in a beam of sunlight in your bedroom, looking like magical little fairies floating in the golden hour, remember what dust can be. Remember that for a few decades, the dust in the wind was glowing with a half-life of thousands of years. We have mostly stopped blowing up mountains in the sky, but the isotopes are still there, diluted, drifting, a permanent part of the recipe of the air we breathe. The air is no longer just nitrogen and oxygen. It is a history book of our nuclear age, written in invisible ink that clicks on a Geiger counter. But the glowing dust was high-tech terror. It was the fear of the atom, of the future, of the scientist in the lab coat. While we were looking up, worrying about the bomb, something far more primitive, far grittier, And far more suffocating was brewing on the ground. The air wasn't just carrying invisible isotopes. It was about to pick up the Earth itself. We had broken the sky with bombs, but we had broken the ground with plows. And the wind, ever the opportunist, was about to pick up the pieces of a broken landscape and hurl them at us in a solid wall of darkness. The radioactive shimmer was scary, but the Black Sunday storms were a monster you could see coming from miles. While the scientists were busy turning the air into a radioactive laboratory in the high atmosphere, the farmers on the ground were busy breaking the earth in a way that would turn the sky into a tomb. We often fear the future, the high-tech, the atomic, the invisible. But sometimes the air decides to punish us with the oldest material on the planet, dirt. I stopped loving the air when I learned that it can become solid enough to bury a house. I stopped loving it when I stood on the plains of history and watched the Black Sunday storms of the 1930s, where the atmosphere didn't just get dirty. It became a moving wall of earth that erased the sun. To understand this betrayal, you have to understand the skin of the world. For thousands of years, the Great Plains of North America were covered in a thick, tangled mat of buffalo grass. This grass was the anchor. Its roots went deep, holding the soil in place against the violent prairie winds. It was a perfect system. The wind blew, the grass bent, and the dust stayed down. But then we arrived with our steel plows. We looked at that grass and saw an obstacle. We wanted wheat, we wanted corn. So, in a frenzy of agricultural greed, known as the Great Plow-Up, we skinned the land. We turned millions of acres of sod upside down, exposing the naked, pulverized soil to the sky for the first time in eons. Then the rain stopped. The sun baked the soil into a fine talcum powder dust. And the air, which loves a vacuum and loves to move, saw its opportunity. It picked up the land. April 14th, 1935, Black Sunday. It started as a beautiful, clear day. People were out walking, hanging laundry, driving to church. The air felt calm, deceptively innocent. But on the northern horizon, something impossible appeared. It looked like a mountain range where no mountains existed. It was a jagged, shifting wall of blackness, stretching from the ground up to a height of 10,000 feet. It wasn't a cloud. Clouds are water vapor. This was a duster. It was hundreds of millions of tons of topsoil, churned into a frenzy by a cold front hitting the hot air of the plains. As it approached, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in minutes. The birds were the first to panic. Thousands of them flew desperately ahead of the wall, screaming, diving into barns and houses to escape the air itself. Then the rabbits, then the coyotes. The air was hurting nature before it. When the wall hit, it didn't wash over you like a mist. It slammed into you like a physical blow. The light vanished instantly. It went from bright afternoon to the darkest midnight in seconds. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. You couldn't see the person standing next to you. You were alone in a void of screaming wind and flying dirt. The air was no longer a gas. It was an abrasive. It acted like a sandblaster. It stripped the paint off cars. It scoured the varnish off houses. If you were caught outside, it scoured your skin. It forced its way through the cracks in the windows, under the doors, through the keyholes. People stuffed wet sheets into the window frames, taped up the cracks, huddled in the center of their rooms with damp cloths over their faces. But the air found a way. It piled up in drifts inside the house, burying the furniture, coating the dinner plates, filling the attic until the ceilings collapsed under the weight of the sky. But the most terrifying thing about the Black Sunday storms was something few people talk about: the electricity. The friction of billions of dust particles colliding with each other generated massive amounts of static electricity. The air became charged. It crackled. If you touched a metal doorknob, it would knock you to the floor. If you shook hands with someone, a blue spark would jump between your fingers. Barbed wire fences began to glow with a ghostly blue fire, humming with the energy of the storm. Cars stopped running because the static shorted out their ignition systems. The air was so supercharged with friction that it felt like the atmosphere itself was angry, snapping and biting at anything that tried to move through it. And you had to breathe this. That is the horror that keeps me awake. You couldn't hold your breath for hours. You had to inhale. And with every breath, you were pulling the landscape into your body. This wasn't the invisible radiation of the bomb. This was grit. You could feel it crunching between your teeth. You could taste the minerals of the earth. You swallowed it, forming balls of mud in your stomach. But in your lungs, it was a catastrophe. The doctors called it dust pneumonia or the brown plague. It was a slow, mechanical suffocation. The fine silica dust coated the alveoli, the tiny air sacs in your lungs where oxygen enters the blood. Your body, trying to clean itself, produced mucus to trap the dust, but there was too much dust. The mucus clogged the airways. Children were the most vulnerable. Their small lungs filled up faster. They would cough up mud buttons, solid little pellets of phlegm and dirt. They were literally drowning in the land their parents had plowed. Thousands died, not from starvation, but because the air had become too thick to sustain life. The psychological toll of this air was profound. Imagine living in a world where the sky hates you. Imagine waking up every morning to check the horizon, knowing that at any moment, the sun could be blotted out. The Dust Bowl wasn't just a weather event. It was a betrayal of the fundamental pact between humans and the environment. We need the air to be transparent. We need it to be empty. When the air becomes solid, we lose our sanity. People went mad. The constant wind, the relentless grit, the inability to ever feel clean, it broke them. Suicide spiked. People simply walked out into the storm and didn't come back, swallowed by the brown fog. I stopped loving the air when I read the diaries of the women who lived through this. They wrote about cleaning a room, scrubbing every inch, only to watch a little ripple of dust snake across the floor 5 minutes later. They wrote about baking bread, only to find the dough gray with grit before it even went into the oven. They realized that the air is not out there. The air is inside. It is inside your house, inside your cupboards, inside your body. There is no barrier strong enough to keep the atmosphere out. If the atmosphere decides to be dirty, you will be dirty. If it decides to be heavy, you will be crushed. The Black Sunday storm traveled all the way to the East Coast. It dropped Oklahoma soil on the decks of ships in the Atlantic Ocean. It dusted the desk of the president in the White House. It was a message from the heartland. You broke the land, and now the air is bringing it to you. It forced the creation of the Soil Conservation Service. It forced us to change how we farm. But the lesson remained. The air is a fluid system. If you loosen the earth in Kansas, the wind can pick it up and choke a politician in Washington. We tend to think of air as light. We use the phrase light as air, but the Dust Bowl proved that air is a carrier. It is a freight train. It can carry the weight of a state and drop it on another state. It turned the sky into a conveyor belt of destruction. And while the dust eventually settled and the grass slowly grew back, the trust was broken. We had seen the sky turn black at noon. We had seen the blue sparks dancing on the fences. We had heard the screams of the wind that sounded like a living thing in pain. The Dust Bowl was a natural disaster, amplified by human error, a collision of weather and agriculture. But it was still open air. It was vast, wide, and spreading. As the 1940s rolled into the post-war boom, the threat of the air began to contract. It moved from the open plains to the closed valleys. It moved from the dust of the farm to the smoke of the factory. We were about to learn that while a dust storm is terrifying, there is something even deadlier: stillness. We usually fear the wind. We fear the hurricane, the tornado, the gale. But the next horror on my list wasn't caused by the air moving too fast. It was caused by the air stopping completely. It was caused by the air becoming a stagnant pool, trapping a small industrial town in a bubble of concentrated poison. We are moving from the roaring darkness of Black Sunday to the silent, creeping gray of the Donora Death Fog. The air was about to show us that sometimes the most dangerous thing it can do is simply refuse to leave. We are conditioned to fear the storm. We lock our doors when the wind howls. We hide in basements when the sirens wail. But I stopped loving the air when I realized that its silence is often deadlier than its rage. The Black Sunday storms were terrifying because the air was moving too fast, carrying too much solid matter. But in late October 1948, in a small town in Pennsylvania, the air did something arguably worse. It stopped. It simply ceased to flow. And in that stillness, it transformed a bustling community into a gas chamber without walls. This is the story of the Donora Death Fog, and it is the moment we learned that the sky can act like a lid on a coffin. Donora is a classic American mill town, tucked into a sharp bend of the Monongahela River. It sits in a deep valley, surrounded by high, steep hills. In the 1940s, it was a place of fire and industry. The skyline was dominated by the zinc works and the steel mills, their smokestacks pumping out clouds of sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, and metal dust 24 hours a day. For decades, the people of Donora didn't mind the smoke. They had a saying, "That's the smell of money." The smoke meant the mills were running, men were working, and families were fed. The wind usually blew down the river valley, carrying the fumes away, dispersing the poison into the wider world. But on Tuesday, October 26, 1948, the weather betrayed them. A large cold air mass settled over the valley, but above it, a layer of warm air slid into place. In meteorology, this is called a temperature inversion. Normally, air gets colder as you go up, which allows the warm, dirty air from the ground to rise and escape. But an inversion flips the script. That layer of warm air acts like a physical ceiling, a seal on top of a Tupperware container. The air inside the valley couldn't rise. It couldn't leave. It was trapped. At first, nobody panicked. It was just a fog. But as the mills kept churning, pumping out their waste into this stagnant, sealed pocket of air, the composition of the atmosphere began to change. The fog turned from white to yellow, and then to a greasy, dark amber. It began to smell. Not just the usual industrial tang, but a sharp, biting odor that tasted like sucking on a handful of pennies. It was the taste of dissolved zinc and sulfur. By Wednesday and Thursday, the air was no longer just a gas. It was an irritant. You couldn't see across the street. Drivers had to lean their heads out of their car windows to see the curb, creeping along at 2 miles per hour. Street lights were turned on at noon, glowing like dim, drowning stars in a sea of murky soup. And yet, life went on. The mill owners didn't shut down the furnaces. The people didn't leave. They were used to grit. They didn't realize that this time, the grit wasn't leaving. It was concentrating. The horror of Donora is found in the mundanity of the events that continued inside the fog. It was Halloween week. The town held its annual Halloween parade on Friday night. Imagine that scene. Children dressed as ghosts, witches, and skeletons, marching down Main Street, disappearing into a toxic mist that was actually killing them. They were walking through a cloud of fluorine and sulfuric acid, holding their candy bags, while the air around them slowly burned their lungs. It is a macabre image that haunts me. The innocent play of childhood unfolding inside an industrial disaster. The high school football team played their game that weekend too, the Donora Dragons. The coaches couldn't see the players from the sidelines. The crowd couldn't see the ball. The players reported that the air felt thick and spicy in their throats. They were running sprints in an atmosphere that was chemically similar to the inside of a car exhaust pipe. But they played on because we trust the air. We assume that if we are outside, we are safe. We assume that outside means ventilated, but the ventilation was broken. Inside the homes of Donora, the tragedy was quiet and intimate. The smog wasn't stopped by doors or windows. It seeped through the cracks. It filled the living rooms and bedrooms. The elderly and the asthmatic were the first to fall. They started struggling to breathe on Friday. By Saturday, the town's doctors were overwhelmed. Their phones rang off the hook, not with people complaining of a cough, but with people gasping, "I can't breathe. It feels like there's a weight on my chest." The firefighters went door to door, carrying tanks of oxygen, giving a few minutes of relief to the dying before rushing to the next house. But there wasn't enough oxygen. The funeral homes began to fill up. 20 people died in the span of a few days. Thousands were sickened, their lungs permanently scarred by the chemical burns. And the cause wasn't a virus. It wasn't a bacteria. It was the air itself, stagnant and heavy, refusing to move. I stopped loving the air when I read the accounts of the Donora cough. It wasn't a normal cough. It was a desperate, hacking attempt to expel a poison that was everywhere. Survivors described the sensation of the air biting them. They said the fog left a layer of slime on their porches that was so acidic it ate the paint off their houses. If it ate the paint off a wooden board, imagine what it did to the soft, pink tissue of the alveoli. The inversion finally broke on Sunday when a storm front moved in to wash the valley clean. But the damage was done. Donora proved that the atmosphere is not infinite. It is not a magical sponge that absorbs our sins. It is a finite system. If you pump poison into a closed room, you die. And under the right weather conditions, a valley, a city, or a state can become a closed room. The betrayal here feels personal because it involves the weather turning against us in a passive way. We can fight a storm. We can board up windows against a hurricane. But you can't fight stillness. You can't fight an inversion. You just have to wait, breathing shallowly, hoping the wind returns before your lungs give out. It turned the simple act of living in a valley into a death sentence. The Donora smog was the first time in American history that we realized air pollution wasn't just a nuisance. It was a mass casualty event waiting to happen. It shattered the illusion that industry and nature could coexist without boundaries. It showed us that the air has a tipping point. You can load it with particulate matter for years, and it seems fine. But add one calm day one day where the wind decides to rest, and the equation changes instantly from haze to poison. This event makes you look at a calm, still day differently. When I step outside on a morning where not a single leaf is moving, where the smoke from a chimney goes straight up and then flattens out against an invisible ceiling, I don't feel peace. I feel anxiety. I feel the lid. I look at the sky and wonder if the air is circulating, or if it is hoarding. I wonder what is building up in the silence, invisible and tasteless, waiting for the concentration to reach critical mass. But Donora was a small town. It was easy for the rest of the world to dismiss it as a freak accident in a dirty valley. It won't happen here, they said in New York and Paris. We are too big. Our air moves too much. They were wrong. The air was about to prove that size doesn't matter. It was about to take the lesson of Donora, the cold air, the warm lid, the sulfur smoke, and apply it to one of the largest, most modern cities on Earth. Donora was a warning shot, a tragedy of 20 souls. What was coming next was a massacre. The air was gathering its strength, preparing to descend on a capital city, to stop the buses, to blind the cinemas, and to kill not by the dozen, but by the thousand. We are leaving the Pennsylvania Valley and returning to London, but this isn't the stink of the river anymore. This is the Great Smog, the event that would finally strip the romance from the fog forever and reveal the true choking cost of the coal we burned. If Donora was the warning shot, London in 1952 was the execution. We often think of catastrophes as loud events, explosions, crashing waves, screaming sirens. But the Great Smog taught me that the air can kill you without making a sound. It can kill you while you are sitting in your favorite armchair, reading the newspaper. It can kill you while you are sleeping in your own bed, dreaming of clear skies. This was the event that finally stripped the romance from the London fog and revealed it to be exactly what it was: a chemical weapon we had manufactured ourselves and unleashed upon our own capital. It is December 5th, 1952. You are in London. The war has been over for 7 years, but the city is still scarred, still recovering. It is bitterly cold. An anticyclone has settled over the British Isles, pushing the air down, creating a motionless, freezing lid over the city. Naturally, millions of people do the only thing they can to stay warm. They heap coal into their fireplaces. But this isn't the high-quality, clean-burning anthracite coal of the past. Britain is exporting its best coal to pay off war debts. The people of London are burning nutty slack, a cheap, dusty, sulfur-rich sludge that burns dirty and smells foul. As the smoke rises from a million chimneys, it hits that layer of cold, stagnant air and stops. It has nowhere to go. It traps the particulates, the sulfur dioxide, and the hydrochloric acid right there at street level. And then the fog rolls in from the Thames. The water vapor mixes with the smoke, and the pea souper is born. But pea soup sounds too thick, too culinary, too harmless. This wasn't soup. This was an acidic aerosol. By the next morning, the sun has vanished. The sky is a sickly shade of yellow-black, bruising to a dark gray. The visibility drops to a few yards, then a few feet. By Sunday, you can't see your own feet when you look down. People are getting lost in their own neighborhoods. They are walking into lampposts, falling off curbs, wandering blindly into the road. The city of London, the beating heart of commerce and culture, simply stops. The buses stop running because the drivers can't see the road. Ambulances stop responding to calls. The drivers have to walk in front of the vehicles, holding flares just to find the curb. And eventually, even that becomes impossible. The sick are told to find their own way to the hospital. The cinemas close, not because of a power outage, but because the smog is seeped inside the theaters, and the audience can no longer see the screen from the back row. Imagine that. Sitting in a movie theater, the air so thick with pollution that the projector beam is swallowed by the gloom before it hits the white sheet. I stopped loving the air when I realized how it violated the sanctity of the interior. We like to believe that when we close our front door and latch the window, we have shut the world out. But the Great Smog didn't respect doors. It was a greasy, heavy gas. It slid through the keyholes. It seeped through the cracks in the floorboards. It came down the chimneys. People woke up to find a black film covering their mirrors and their bed sheets. The air inside the house was the same as the air outside, toxic. And the sound of this catastrophe was silence. There was no traffic. The birds had stopped singing. Many of them had dropped dead from the trees or smashed into buildings they couldn't see. The only sound was the coughing. A dry, rasping, collective cough echoing from every brick row house in the city. The air tasted of rotten eggs and burning rubber. It stung the eyes so badly that people walked with their hands over their faces, tears streaming down their cheeks, mixing with the soot to form black streaks. But the true horror was happening in the lungs. The sulfur dioxide in the smog was reacting with the moisture in people's respiratory tracts to form sulfuric acid. The people of London were literally breathing battery acid. Their lungs were inflamed, filling with fluid, drowning them in their own reaction to the air. And they died. They died in staggering numbers. But because everything was so quiet, because the ambulances weren't running, nobody realized the scale of the horror until the undertakers ran out of coffins. The florists ran out of funeral wreaths. In 5 days, 4,000 people died. In the weeks and months that followed, From the lingering complications, the death toll rose to an estimated 12,000. That is more than many battles in the war they had just survived. They didn't die in a dramatic blaze of glory. They died in their armchairs. They died in their sleep, their chests simply giving up the fight against the heavy, poisonous weight of the atmosphere. It was a massacre by suffocation, conducted by the very air that was supposed to sustain them. There is a specific story from the Great Smog that haunts me. The Smithfield Club's annual cattle show was taking place in London that week. Prize-winning cows, the finest livestock in the country, were brought to the city. As the smog seeped into the venue, the cows began to choke. Their large lungs were efficient at pulling in the poison. The breeders, desperate to save their animals, soaked sackcloth in whiskey and wrapped it around the cows' noses, trying to filter the air, trying to sedate the panic. Even the animals weren't safe. The air had become an indiscriminate predator, targeting anything that dared to respire. I stopped loving the air because of the betrayal of the London fog. For a century, writers and painters had romanticized the fog. Sherlock Holmes disappearing into the mist, the moody, atmospheric swirl of the Victorian streets. We made it aesthetic. We put it on postcards. But the Great Smog revealed that our romance was a death wish. The fog wasn't a mystery. It was a crime scene. It was the physical manifestation of our refusal to manage our own waste. We had turned the sky into a sewer, and we were drowning in the backwash. After 1952, the laws changed. The Clean Air Acts were passed. We stopped burning coal in open hearths. The black smoke slowly cleared, and the famous London fog became a memory. But the trust was broken. We learned that the atmosphere is not a backdrop for our stories. It is a biological necessity that we can easily destroy. We learned that civilization is fragile, that a few days of bad air can bring an empire to its knees, stop its trains, and kill its citizens in their beds. The Great Smog was the peak of visible pollution. It was the undeniable, soot-black face of the enemy. But as we cleaned up the smoke, as the skies turned blue again, we fell into a new trap. We thought that if the air was clear, it was safe. We thought that if we couldn't see the soot, the danger was gone. But we were wrong. We were about to enter an era where the threat wasn't a heavy, black cloud, but a fine, invisible mist. We were about to trade the chimney for the spray nozzle. We stopped fearing the coal fire and started fearing the crop duster. We moved from the unintentional poisoning of the city to the intentional poisoning of the fields. We decided that the best way to grow food was to rain chemicals from the sky, to use the air as a delivery system for pesticides that were designed to kill nerve systems. The air was about to become a vector for a new kind of toxicity, one that didn't make you cough immediately, but that lingered in the water, in the soil, and in the blood for generations. The era of smoke was ending. The era of the chemical rain was just beginning. We left London in the dark, choking on the thick black soot of a coal fire. That was a horror we could see, a monster that darkened the sun. But as we moved into the modern era, into the bright, technicolor optimism of the mid-20th century, the air betrayed us in a new, more insidious way. It cleaned up its act. The skies turned blue again. The smoke cleared. And in that newfound clarity, we let our guard down. We assumed that if the air looked clean, it was safe. We were wrong. This is the chapter where I stopped loving the air because it became a liar. It became a clear, invisible carrier for a poison we invited directly into our neighborhoods. This is the era of the spray. Imagine a perfect summer day in the American Midwest, or perhaps the Central Valley of California. The sky is a piercing, endless azure. The corn is high and green. The world looks vibrant, healthy, and alive. Then you hear a low hum. It's a romantic sound, at first the drone of a propeller engine. You look up and see a small biplane, a silhouette against the sun, gliding low over the fields. It looks heroic, a mastery of flight and agriculture combined. But as it pulls up, it leaves behind a trailing white ribbon, a mist that hangs in the air, glittering like diamond dust in the sunlight. It looks beautiful. It looks like progress. But that mist is a neurotoxin. We had entered the age of chemical warfare against nature, and we decided that the atmosphere was the most efficient delivery system. We weren't just dumping waste into the sky anymore. We were deliberately loading the air with pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. We were weaponizing the breeze to kill bugs, forgetting that the air doesn't know the difference between a boll weevil and a human child. I stopped loving the air when I saw the footage of the fogging trucks in 1950s suburbia. You might have seen these clips. A truck drives slowly down a tree-lined street in a quiet neighborhood. On the back, a massive cannon blasts out a thick, billowing cloud of DDT mixed with fuel oil. It rolls over the manicured lawns, over the white picket fences, and into the open windows of the houses. And the children are running inside the cloud. They are dancing in the fog. They are chasing the truck on their bicycles, disappearing into the whiteout, laughing, breathing deep lungfuls of the sweet, chemical mist. It is a scene of pure horror viewed from the present, but back then, it was a celebration. The air was being sanitized. We thought we were scrubbing the atmosphere of mosquitoes and polio and nuisance. We didn't understand that we were inhaling organochlorings, chemicals that do not break down, chemicals that bind to the fat in our bodies and stay there forever. The air in that moment wasn't a life giver. It was a vector for bioaccumulation. The breath those children took in the cloud would stay with them for decades, sitting in their cells, a silent, ticking time bomb delivered by the wind. This was the era where the smell of clean changed. Clean air used to smell like ozone, pine, rain on dust. Now, clean air smelled like chemicals. It smelled like the sharp, acrid tang of bug spray. We were taught to associate that smell with safety, with the triumph of man over the pests of the earth. But the air is a fluid. It doesn't stay in the field. It doesn't stay behind the truck. It drifts. Spray drift is a sterile term for a terrifying reality. It means that the air carries the poison away from its target. You could be miles away from the farm, sitting on your porch, drinking iced tea, and the air you breathe is laced with the invisible fallout of a crop duster. The atmosphere became a highway for toxins. It picked up the molecules of parathion and malathion and carried them into the schoolyards and the churches. We turned the sky into a diffuse, low-dose gas chamber, and we called it modern agriculture. And what makes this betrayal so deep is that it was invisible. In London, you knew the smog was killing you. You could taste the sulfur, but the pesticides? They were often odorless or masked with sweet-smelling solvents. You could breathe in a fatal dose of potential carcinogens and feel nothing but a slight tickle in your throat. The air had become a stealth assassin. It allowed us to feel safe while it slowly poisoned the water table, the birds, and us. This is the world Rachel Carson warned us about in Silent Spring. She didn't just write about dead birds. She wrote about a fable for tomorrow, where a white powder fell from the sky like snow, and a strange stillness settled over the town. That white powder was in the air. It was suspended particulate matter designed to kill nervous systems, and we breathed it. We breathed it because we had to. You cannot boycott the air. You cannot choose not to inhale the drift. The romance of the country air died here. We used to send sick people to the country to recover, to breathe the fresh, unpolluted wind. But now, the country air was more toxic than the city air. It was loaded with synthetic compounds that nature had never seen before. The fresh breeze over the wheat field was actually a chemical soup. The irony is suffocating. We fled the soot of the city for the health of the country, only to find that the country air was being weaponized to maximize yield. And it wasn't just the bugs we were attacking. We attacked the plants too. In the jungles of Vietnam and later in forestry management at home, we unleashed the defoliants, Agent Orange. We sprayed it from planes, coating millions of acres. The air became a scythe. It stripped the leaves off the trees. If the air can kill a jungle, stripping it bare in a matter of days, what is it doing to the delicate cilia in your bronchial tubes? The soldiers who breathed that mist, the villagers who lived under that rain, they learned the hardest lesson of all. When you turn the air into a weapon, the collateral damage is everything that breathes. I remember reading about pilots who flew these crop dusters. They were daredevils, skilled aviators. But many of them died young, not from crashes, but from agricultural pilot sickness. They spent their days flying through their own spray. They were breathing the cloud they created. A cockpit wasn't a sanctuary. It was a fume hood. The air inside the plane was just as deadly as the air outside. It showed that there is no escape. You can be the one pulling the trigger, the one releasing the poison, but you still have to breathe the same air as your victim. So tonight, as you listen to the wind outside your window, ask yourself, what is it carrying? Is it just pollen and dust? Or is it carrying the drift from a field 5 miles away? Is it carrying the micro droplets of a neighbor's weed killer? The air is a courier that never stops working, and it doesn't check the package. It delivers whatever we give it. And for 50 years, we have given it billions of pounds of synthetic chemicals, trusting that the sky is big enough to dilute it all. But the sky isn't that big. The atmosphere is a thin, fragile envelope. And while we were busy poisoning the air near the ground with sprays and fogs, looking down at the bugs and the weeds, we forgot to look up. We forgot that the atmosphere has layers, and that the upper layers protect us from a terror far older and far more deadly than any chemical we could invent. We were spraying the bottom of the ocean of air, but at the very top, something else was breaking. The chemicals we used in our hairsprays, our fridges, and our air conditioners were rising. They were drifting up, past the clouds, past the crop dusters, into the silent, freezing stratosphere. And there, they were eating a hole in the roof of the world. We are moving from the poison we breathe to the poison that burns. We are about to discover that the air isn't just a gas we inhale. It is a shield that protects us from the cosmic fire. And we had just handed it a solvent to dissolve itself. The betrayal of the air in the fields was personal, a poisoning of the immediate breath, but the betrayal happening above our heads was existential. We had spent the first half of the 20th century worrying about what we were breathing in, but by the 1980s, we had to start worrying about what the air was letting through. This is the moment I stopped loving the air, because I realized it is not a permanent fixture. It is not a solid roof. It is a fabric, and like any fabric, it can be torn. And we didn't tear it with bombs or wars. We tore it with the most banal, innocent sound in the world, the hiss of a spray can. You probably remember the sound. The sheetee of hairspray in a tiled bathroom, the rattle of a paint can, the hum of a refrigerator, keeping your milk cold. These were the sounds of modern comfort. We loved them. We loved the convenience of the aerosol, the miracle of artificial cooling. Inside those cans and coils were miracle molecules called chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. They were the perfect chemical, non-toxic, non-flammable, cheap, and stable. You could breathe them, and they wouldn't hurt you. You could spray them on a fire, and they would put it out. We thought we had synthesized the perfect gas, but we forgot to ask where the gas goes when we are done with it. We assumed the air was a limitless trash can, but the air is a ladder. Those CFCs, being so stable, didn't break down. They didn't dissolve in rain. They didn't react with the soil. They just floated. They drifted aimlessly, lighter than the worries of the people spraying them, slowly migrating upward. They rose past the birds, past the clouds, past the jet planes, and entered the stratosphere. They traveled to the very edge of space, to the ozone layer. The ozone layer, is the only reason you exist. It is a thin, fragile veil of trioxygen molecules that absorbs the sun's most violent ultraviolet radiation. Without it, the surface of the Earth would be sterilized. DNA cannot survive the raw glare of the sun. For billions of years, that layer held the line, absorbing the cosmic burns so life could crawl out of the ocean. But when our perfect CFC molecules hit that high-altitude radiation, they broke apart. They released chlorine. And chlorine, up there, is a serial killer. One single atom of chlorine can destroy 100,000 molecules of ozone. It acts like a microscopic Pac-Man, chewing through the shield, regenerating itself and moving on to the next victim. It doesn't stop, it just eats. And because we had pumped millions of tons of this stuff into the sky for decades, the eating became a frenzy. I stopped loving the air when I saw the maps. You know the ones. The satellite images of the South Pole. The globe is white and blue, but over Antarctica, there is a massive, angry bruise. A swirling vortex of purple and black. The hole. It wasn't a literal hole. The air was still there, but the shield was gone. The ozone had been thinned to near non-existence. We had effectively removed the roof of the world. The discovery was so shocking that the scientists didn't believe it at first. When the British Antarctic Survey first measured the ozone levels in 1985, the numbers were so low that they assumed their machine was broken. They bought a new machine. It gave the same numbers. They thought, surely we haven't destroyed the sky. But they had. We had. We had been chemically eroding our own atmosphere for 50 years without noticing. This realization shifted the psychology of the air completely. Suddenly, the sky wasn't a protective blanket. It was a threat. The sun wasn't a warm friend. It was a nuclear reactor that we had stripped the shielding off of. In Australia and New Zealand, beneath the thinning edges of the hole, the weather report began to include burn times. People were told they could burn in minutes. Children had to wear hats with neck flaps and rash guards just to play outside. The air had become transparent to danger. It forces you to confront a terrifying fragility. We live in a goldfish bowl, and we had cracked the glass. The air is the only thing standing between your skin and the void. When you lie in bed and think about the atmosphere, you usually think about oxygen. But the atmosphere's job isn't just to feed your lungs. It's to hide you from the stars. The universe is a violent, radioactive place, full of X-rays and gamma rays and UV storms. The air is our cloak, and we took a pair of scissors to it because we wanted our hair to stay in place. The hole in the sky era introduced a new kind of fear, the fear of the invisible burn. You can't feel UV radiation. It doesn't feel hot until it's too late. It creates a silent mutation in your cells. It breaks the rungs of the DNA ladder. We were walking around under a damaged sky, being irradiated by our own star. The air, which looked blue and innocent, was actually letting the enemy through the gates. And consider how close we came. If we hadn't discovered the hole when we did, if we had kept spraying for another 20 years, the hole would have spread. It would have covered the inhabited world. Crop yields would have collapsed as plants withered under the radiation. Blindness in animals would have become common. The ecosystem would have unraveled. We were sleepwalking toward a planetary sterilization event, all while humming along to the radio and enjoying our air-conditioned cars. The betrayal here is that the air didn't fight back. It just gave up. It showed us that it cannot repair itself faster than we can break it. We tend to think of nature as resilient, but the ozone layer is not resilient. It is a chemical accident that happens to favor life. It is a thin band of gas, no thicker than a coin if you compressed it all down to sea level. That is it. That is the shield, a penny's width of gas. And we burned a hole through it. I remember the feeling of vulnerability that came with this news. It felt like the ceiling of my bedroom had been removed. It felt like I was exposed to the cold, unblinking eye of the cosmos. The romance of the open air died because open suddenly meant undefended. I didn't want open air anymore. I wanted thick, heavy, protective air. I wanted a lead shield. I wanted a roof. We eventually banned CFCs. The hole is slowly, painfully healing. It will take another 50 years to close. But the trust is gone. We proved that we are capable of changing the physics of the atmosphere on a global scale by accident. We proved that the air remembers our mistakes. The CFCs we released in the 70s are still up there, still eating ozone, still drifting. The ghosts of our past convenience are still haunting the stratosphere. So as you drift off, imagine that thin blue line above you. It feels solid, but it is not. It is a delicate balance of chemistry that we disrupted with a hair product. We patched the hole, but we learned that the sky is not invincible. It is a fragile skin, and we are a sharp object. We survived the UV burn, mostly. But just as we were celebrating the Montreal Protocol and the saving of the ozone, the air was preparing another lesson. We thought the danger came from the sun from above. We thought the solution was to stop using spray cans. But on the other side of the world, inside a concrete reactor hall, the air was about to pick up something far heavier than a chlorine atom. We had fixed the invisible hole, but we were about to unleash an invisible wind. The air was about to show us that it doesn't just carry chemicals. It carries the very essence of matter falling apart. We are moving from the silent burn of the ozone hole to the metallic taste of the radioactive wind. The sky was about to glow again, not with dust, but with the fire of a dying reactor. The ozone hole was a slow, silent crisis, a thinning of the veil that took decades to notice. But while we were looking up at the stratosphere, worrying about the sun, the air was preparing to betray us from the ground up, with a speed and violence that would rewrite the history of the 20th century. The next reason I stopped loving the air is because I learned that it does not keep secrets. You can build a wall, you can close a border, you can cut the phone lines and censor the press, but you cannot censor the wind. On an unseasonably warm night in April 1986, the air became the ultimate whistleblower, and it did so by carrying a message of death across an entire continent. We are in Pripyat, Ukraine. It is the early hours of April 26th. The air is soft, smelling of pine forests and the damp riverbank of the Pripyat River. It feels like a spring breeze, innocent and fresh. But a few miles away, inside the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant, the air is being tortured. Reactor number 4 has just torn itself apart. The roof, weighing 1,000 tons, has been blown into the night sky. The core, the graphite, the uranium, the burning heart of the atom is exposed to the open atmosphere. This wasn't a bomb. A bomb explodes and finishes. This was a fire. The graphite moderator blocks inside the reactor caught fire, burning at thousands of degrees. And what does a fire do? It creates a chimney. It sucks in the cool air from the ground, heats it up, and blasts it upward into the sky. For 10 days, that reactor acted as a volcano, pumping a continuous column of radioactive isotopes into the atmosphere. Iodine-131, cesium-137, strontium-90. The air grabbed these particles and ran with them. There is a bridge in Pripyat that overlooks the plant. It is known now as the Bridge of Death. Legend says that people gathered there that night to watch the fire. The air around them was glowing, not from the flames, but from the ionization of the atmosphere itself. The radiation was so intense, it was stripping the electrons off the air molecules, creating a ghostly, shimmering luminescence. The people stood there, breathing in the spectacle. They reported a strange taste in their mouths, metallic, sour, like sucking on a battery. That was the taste of the air killing them. They were inhaling the fuel of the reactor. The air had become a solid dose of radiation, entering the soft tissues of their bodies with every gasp of wonder. But the betrayal of the air didn't stop at the city limits. This is where the story becomes truly terrifying. The Soviet Union tried to lock the disaster down. They cut the phone lines. They didn't tell the world. They didn't even tell their own people in Kiev, just down the river. They bet on silence. But they forgot about the wind. The air picked up the radioactive dust and carried it north and west. It didn't stop for passport control. It didn't respect the Iron Curtain. 2 days later, nearly 700 miles away in Sweden, a worker at the Forsmark nuclear power plant stepped through a radiation detector on his way into work. The alarm went off. He thought it was a glitch. He checked his shoes. They were radioactive. He hadn't even entered the plant yet. The radiation wasn't coming from inside the Swedish factory. It was coming from the grass outside. The air had carried the ghost of Chernobyl across the Baltic Sea and dropped it on his boots. The wind had exposed a lie. I stopped loving the air when I looked at the maps of the Chernobyl plume. It is a chaotic, swirling mess. One day the wind blew north, poisoning Belarus. The next day it swung west, dusting Poland and Germany, then south. The air took the most dangerous substance known to man and distributed it like pollen. It rained radiation on the Welsh countryside, contaminating the sheep so badly they couldn't be sold for decades. It dropped cesium on the mushrooms in Bavaria. It contaminated the reindeer in Lapland. The air proved that there is no such thing as a local accident. In a world wrapped in a single fluid atmosphere, everyone lives downwind of everyone else. And consider the red forest. The pine forest directly behind the power plant turned a rusty, ginger-red color and died within days. The trees didn't burn. They were killed by the air. The radiation was so intense that the needles simply died on the branch. Imagine standing in a forest where the breeze is so toxic that it kills the trees without a flame. That is the definition of bad air. It is an invisible scythe. But the most haunting relationship with the air during this time belongs to the liquidators, the men sent in to clean up the mess. The air over the reactor was so radioactive that it broke robots. The electronics would fry. So they used biorobots, men. They ran out onto the roof of the adjacent building to shovel chunks of graphite back into the hole. They could only stay out there for 40 to 90 seconds. In those 90 seconds, the air they moved through was a physical weight of gamma rays. They wore lead sheets, but they couldn't cover their lungs. Every breath was a gamble. They were breathing in a soup of isotopes that would tear their DNA apart for the rest of their shortened lives. The helicopter pilots who flew directly over the open core to drop sand and boron speak of the air as a solid enemy. They could feel the heat and the radiation coming up at them like a fist. They were flying through a column of death. They had to keep their windows open to prevent the radiation from bouncing around inside the cockpit, meaning they were leaning out into the most polluted column of air in human history. Chernobyl taught us that the air is a sponge. It will soak up whatever we release. If we release smoke, it soaks up smoke. If we release a burning reactor core, it soaks up the periodic table, and it holds onto it. The cesium-137 released that week has a half-life of 30 years. It is still there, in the soil, in the wood, in the dust. Every time a forest fire breaks out in the exclusion zone today, the firefighters have to wear respirators because the smoke is radioactive. The air remembers 1986. It recycles the disaster, lifting it up and blowing it around again. A constant reminder that we broke the atom and gave the pieces to the wind. This event killed the idea of fresh air for an entire generation in Europe. Parents kept their children inside for weeks. They were told not to drink the milk, not to eat the leafy vegetables, not to play in the rain. The rain, the thing that cleans the air, was now black rain, bringing the poison down to earth. The air had turned the entire environment into a hazard zone. You couldn't trust the sky. You couldn't trust the grass. You couldn't trust the water. It was total atmospheric betrayal. I lie awake sometimes thinking about that metallic taste. It's such a specific visceral detail to taste the air, to know that the air has changed its composition so fundamentally that your tongue detects it before your Geiger counter does. It makes you realize how intimate our connection to the atmosphere is. We don't just live in it, we consume it. It becomes part of our blood. The isotopes from Chernobyl are in the bones of people who were nowhere near Ukraine. They were carried there by the jet stream, inhaled, processed, and stored. We are all a little bit radioactive because the air is a global conveyor belt that never stops moving. Chernobyl was a burst, a violent event that spiked the air with poison. But as we moved away from the Cold War and into the new millennium, the threat changed again. We stopped blowing up reactors, mostly, but we started making things. Cheap things, plastic things. And we assumed that plastic was solid, that it stayed where we put it. We were wrong. We didn't realize that plastic degrades, that it crumbles into microscopic dust, and that the air, ever the opportunist, would pick it up. The radioactive wind was terrifying because it was invisible energy. But the new wind is terrifying because it is physical. It is material. We are about to discover that the air is no longer just gas. It is a suspension of synthetic particles. We are about to learn that we are plasticizing our own lungs with every breath. We are moving from the heavy isotopes of the past to the lightweight, colorful, indestructible confetti of the modern world. The radioactive wind of Chernobyl was a terrifying anomaly, a specific event where the air carried a distinct, high-energy curse. We could point to the reactor on a map and say, it came from there. But as we settled into the 21st century, the air betrayed us again, not with a bang, but with a slow, silent, and ubiquitous disintegration. We stopped worrying about the invisible isotopes of a nuclear winter and started breathing in the colorful, indestructible confetti of our own convenience. This is the era of the plastic lungs, and it is the final reason I stopped loving the air. I realized that the atmosphere is no longer a natural element. It has become a synthetic soup, and we are the filters. Look around your bedroom right now. Really look at it in the dim light. You see the soft curve of your pillow, the heavy warmth of your duvet, the carpet on the floor, the curtains hanging by the window. You see comfort. But physics sees friction. Every time you move, every time you roll over in your sleep, every time you walk across the rug, you are breaking the world down. Friction is a microscopic violence. It shears off tiny, invisible fragments of whatever it touches. In the past, when our sheets were cotton and our rugs were wool, this dust was organic. It would decompose. It would return to the earth. But today, your world is plastic. Your sheets are a polyester blend. Your carpet is nylon. Your fleece pajamas are recycled PET bottles. Your curtains are acrylic. When you move, you aren't just creating dust. You are creating microplastics. You are shedding. We live in a cloud of our own disintegration. If you could see the air in your room with a microscope right now, you wouldn't see clear gas. You would see a blizzard of tiny, colorful fibers, reds, blues, electric greens, floating in the stagnant air, waiting for the vacuum of your breath to pull them in. I stopped loving the air when I realized that indoor air quality is a euphemism for plastic saturation. We spend 90% of our lives indoors, sealing ourselves inside these boxes of petrochemicals. We think we are safe from the pollution of the city, but the air inside your house is often more clogged with synthetic particles than the air on a busy street. We have created a microclimate of exfoliation. We are breathing our clothes. We are breathing our furniture. We are breathing the carpet. But the horror is that you cannot escape it by going outside. For a long time, we thought plastic pollution was an ocean problem. We worried about the turtles, the whales, The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We treated plastic as a buoyant solid that floated in water. We were wrong. Plastic is lighter than we thought. As it degrades in the sun, becoming brittle and cracking into smaller and smaller pieces, it eventually becomes small enough to be lifted by the wind. The air has become the new ocean. There is a plastic cycle now, just like the water cycle or the carbon cycle. The wind scours the surface of the landfills, the agricultural tarps, the city streets, and it picks up these microfragments. It lifts them into the troposphere. It carries them across continents. There was a study done recently in the Pyrenees Mountains, a place that should be pristine, far from cities, far from industry. Scientists set up collectors to measure the air quality, expecting to find pure mountain nitrogen and oxygen. Instead, they found a rain of plastic. It was snowing polyester and polystyrene. They calculated that roughly 365 tiny plastic particles were falling on every square meter of land every single day. In the middle of nowhere, the air was delivering a package of garbage to the wildest places on Earth. The same thing happened in the Arctic. Researchers drilled into the ice floes, looking for ancient climate data, and they found the snow was pink and gray with microscopic fibers. The air had carried the lint from your dryer, the dust from a tire on a highway in Ohio, and the fragments of a soda bottle from a beach in Thailand, and it had swirled them all together into a global atmospheric suspension. There is no fresh air left on Earth. Every breath you take, whether you are in Times Square, the Sahara Desert, or the North Pole, contains a percentage of plastic. This fundamentally changed my relationship with breathing. Breathing is supposed to be an exchange of life oxygen for carbon dioxide. It is supposed to be a biological process. But now, it is an act of accumulation. When you inhale these fibers, your body doesn't know what to do with them. They are alien invaders. The larger ones get caught in the mucus of your nose and throat. You swallow them, and they become part of your digestion. But the smaller ones, the nanoplastics, they go deep. They spiral down the trachea, through the bronchi, into the deepest, most delicate recesses of the lungs, the alveolar sacs. And there they stick. They are biopersistent. Your body cannot break down a piece of nylon. It cannot dissolve a fragment of a tire. So the immune system attacks it. It tries to wall it off, creating scar tissue. We are slowly turning our lungs into a museum of our consumption habits. We are walking around with the ghost of a plastic bag lodged in our chest. I stopped loving the air when I read that we inhale roughly a credit card's worth of plastic every week. Imagine that. Imagine sitting down on Sunday evening and eating a credit card. You wouldn't do it, but the air forces you to do it. It grinds that card down into a fine powder and pumps it into your system 24 hours a day. We are becoming plasticized from the inside out. And it's not just the solid particles. Plastic carries baggage. These fibers act as rafts for bacteria and viruses. They act as sponges for heavy metals and other toxins. When a piece of microplastic floats through the smog of a city, it absorbs the exhaust fumes. Then you breathe it in. It's a delivery system. A Trojan horse that smuggles concentrated poison past your body's defenses and deposits it directly into your bloodstream. The aesthetic of this is what truly haunts me. We used to fear the black smoke of the coal era. It looked evil. It smelled foul. But this is invisible. Or if you can see it, it looks like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. You've seen them, those beautiful shimmering specks floating in the light coming through your window. You used to think it was just dust, which sounds harmless, almost cozy. But now you know. That sparkle is a shard of polyethylene. That glimmer is a fragment of paint. We have aestheticized our own pollution. We watch it dance in the light, mesmerizing and pretty, while it slowly silts up our respiratory systems. The air has lost its purity. It has lost its definition. It is no longer a gas. It is a slurry, a suspension. We have successfully terraformed the atmosphere of our own planet, not by making it more habitable, but by making it more synthetic. We have merged the technosphere with the biosphere. The boundary between man-made and nature has dissolved in the air. When you look up at the blue sky, you are looking through a haze of suspended debris that will never go away. It will not decompose for centuries. The air you breathe tonight will outlive you. The plastic you inhale in your sleep will remain long after your organic body has turned to dust. It makes you feel claustrophobic, doesn't it? Even in an open field, you are trapped in the output of civilization. There is no way to throw things to anymore. We threw it away, and the air brought it back. It threw it back in our faces. It forced us to consume what we discarded. So as you lie there, feeling the gentle rise and fall of your chest, try not to think about the friction of your sheets. Try not to think about the millions of fibers breaking off and floating up toward your nose. Try not to think about the fact that you are a vacuum cleaner for the Anthropocene. The air is heavy, yes. It is radioactive, yes. But most of all, it is artificial. We wanted a world of convenience, a world of durable, cheap materials, and the air gave us exactly what we asked for. It wrapped us in it. It filled us with it. We have journeyed from the crushing weight of the ancient ocean to the toxic oxygen catastrophe, through the miasma of fear, the soot of industry, the chlorine of war, the dust of the plow, and the isotopes of the bomb. And we have ended up here, in a room filled with floating plastic dust. The air has been many things to us: a crusher, a poisoner, a carrier, a graveyard. But in the end, it is simply a mirror. It reflects exactly how we treat the world. We treated the world as disposable, so the air became disposable trash. But we have to take one final breath. We have to look at where this is going. We have analyzed the history of the air, the ways it has turned against us time and time again. But what happens next? What is the final state of an atmosphere that has been beaten, burned, and filled with plastic? Before we close our eyes for the last time tonight, we need to take stock of the final exhalation. We need to look at the future of breathing in a world that is running out of patience. The air is still here, pressing on you, entering you, sustaining you. But for how long? We have drifted through deep time, from the crushing, methane-rich skies of the early Earth to the radioactive winds of the atomic age, and finally into the plasticized suspension we breathe today. We have seen the atmosphere turn from a creator into a crusher, from a carrier of ghosts to a carrier of poisons. But we cannot close our eyes just yet without looking at where this ocean is flowing. The final reason I stopped loving the air is not because of what it has done, but because of what it is becoming. We are entering the era of the final exhalation, where the air ceases to be a resource we take for granted and becomes a luxury we must negotiate for. The future of the air is heavy. You can already feel it. We are returning, in a strange cyclical irony, to the conditions of the deep past. We are pumping carbon into the atmosphere at a rate that recalls the hot, stifling greenhouses of the Eocene. The air is getting thicker. It holds more moisture. It holds more heat. We are building a sky that wants to cook us. The romance of a fresh breeze is being replaced by the terror of the wet ball, a meteorological term for air that is so hot and so humid that the human body simply cannot cool down. In this future air, sweating does nothing. The sweat stays on your skin, hot and sticky, because the air is too full of water to accept any more. It is air that hugs you to death. And we are seeing the seasons change. The air has invented a new season for us, the smoke season. In California, in Australia, in Siberia, the summer skies now routinely turn a bruised, apocalyptic orange. This isn't the industrial smog of London. This is the landscape itself, burning and entering the atmosphere. We are breathing the ghosts of forests. The air becomes opaque, acrid, and dangerous for weeks at a time. We are learning to tape our windows shut again Just like the Dust Bowl, just like the chemical fog, the air has become a seasonal enemy, forcing us to retreat into our filtered bunkers, watching the sun disappear behind a veil of carbonized wood. This leads to the grim reality of the future, the privatization of breath. We have already monetized water. We buy it in plastic bottles, which then crumble and enter the air. Now, we are beginning to monetize the atmosphere. I stopped loving the air when I realized that clean breath is becoming a status symbol. In the coming decades, the quality of the air you breathe will be directly tied to your bank account. The wealthy will live in hermetically sealed penthouses with hospital-grade HEPA filtration systems, scrubbing the plastics, the smoke, and the pathogens from their personal supply. They will breathe the vintage air of the past. Meanwhile, the rest of the world will breathe the public air, the thick, hot, plastic-laden soup of the street. We are moving toward a world where going outside to get some air will be seen as a health risk. We will see the rise of air bars and oxygen cafes not as novelty acts, but as necessary hydration stations for the lungs. We will see architectural designs that turn buildings into spaceships, completely severed from the hostile atmosphere outside. The shared breath of humanity, the one thing that connected the pauper to the queen during the Great Stink, is being severed. We are segregating the sky. But through all of this, the air remains indifferent. That is the final, crushing realization. The atmosphere does not care if we survive. It is a blind, chaotic physical system. If we load it with carbon, it will heat up. If we fill it with plastic, it will carry plastic. It has no loyalty to the human lung. We evolved for a specific mix of gases, a specific pressure, and a specific temperature. We are the ones who are fragile. The air has been methane before. It can be methane again. It has been poisoned before. It can be poison again. It will survive the plastic age, just as it survived the Great Oxidation event. It will simply swirl and change colors, wrapping the planet in whatever blanket we weave for it, waiting for the next dominant life form to figure out how to breathe the mess we left behind. So I stopped loving the air because I realized it is not my mother. It is not my friend. It is a turbulent, heavy, dangerous ocean that I am forced to swim in every second of my life. It is a relationship of absolute dependency with a partner that is slowly turning hostile. We are the creatures of the bottom, scurrying across the floor of the gas sea, looking up at the hazy light, hoping the pressure doesn't crush us, hoping the chemistry holds for just one more generation. But tonight, right now, the chemistry is holding. And that is where we must leave the fear. Because despite the history, despite the isotopes and the soot and the plastic, you are still here. You are still breathing. The machine is still working. And there is a strange, dark comfort in accepting the weight of it all. You don't have to love the air to respect its power. You don't have to trust it to surrender to it. You just have to let it in and let it out. Now, I want you to let all of that history fade away. Let the millions of years, the smoke of the factories, and the dust of the planes dissolve into the darkness of your room. We are done analyzing. We are done worrying. All that remains is the rhythm. Focus entirely on the physical sensation of the air entering your nose. Feel it. It is cool, smooth, and constant. Despite everything we have discussed, the air is still doing its job. It is feeding you. It is keeping you alive. Feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing you down into your mattress. 14.7 pounds per square inch. Don't fight it. Let it be a heavy blanket. Let that 5 quadrillion tons of sky hold you still. You are safe at the bottom of the ocean. The pressure is grounding you, pinning your shoulders to the bed, making your legs feel heavy and loose. Visualize the air not as a chaotic storm, but as a thick, slow-moving fluid. It is filling the room like warm honey. It is muffling the sounds of the world. It is slowing down time. With every breath you take, you are sinking deeper into this fluid. Inhale slowly. Imagine you are pulling the stillness of the night into your chest. Exhale completely. Imagine you are pushing out the tension, the worry, the history. The air is heavy, and that is good. It means you don't have to hold yourself up. The sky is holding you. The invisible ocean is cradling you. You are suspended in the deep, quiet dark. The wind outside has stopped. The dust has settled. The plastic is still. Everything is pausing for you. Your lungs are slow, rhythmic bellows. In, out, out. There is nothing else to think about. No past, no future. Just this single, heavy, peaceful breath. You are part of the atmosphere now. You are drifting in the current, silent, weightless in the heavy air, deep, asleep. The end. Sweet dreams.